Been a while since I put out a video, but I thought I'd do some shop kind of update video here of some of the improvements I've done. The first one here will be on my PM 1236 lathe from Precision Matthews. I'm the second owner of this, and I bought it about 5 years ago. I've done a few upgrades to it. When I came in, there was no digital readout, so I have bought the digital readout straight from Precision Matthews. It was a kit that came with it. It was very simple to install. You can see it back there. The other thing I did is I put a new 3-jaw chuck I bought from Precision Matthews, as well as a 5C collet chuck I bought from them. Everything mounted up well and works great. I recommend, if you need something, to go directly to Matt. The couple other improvements I've done, I did make a new chuck key. I do have a previous video on that here. It's a little bit longer, and I use it because it clears the headstock when you're trying to tighten things up. The one that came with it was a bit too short. I do have a taper attachment on here. The issue I had was when you had the cross slide all the way back, it was open in here, so I did make this aluminum and had it hard anodized extension, just drilled and tapped in the end, and there's some screws to hold it in. I'll put some grooves in there just so crap would run off. The big thing is I'm 6'3" and this lathe is a little low. So what I've done is I put a lift kit on it where I put some steel blocks between the base and the lathe itself. And that seems to help my back out quite a bit. It raised it up about 3 inches, 3.5 inches. The other thing is when you do that, there is a linkage. I'll attach a picture, but for the foot brake down here, you have to extend that also. Another thing I did on this was a bracket for keeping the chuck, the spare chuck. This is just an angle iron frame with some wood I put in there. I also added those blue plastic pieces to the side of it to hold some tools, so they'd be handy when I needed them. The last thing I did is try and put out a video or some pictures on this, is I built this tool rack. I did make extra tool holders out of 4140 pre-hard. A lot of work. I blackened them up. But this is just a piece of 80-20 structural tube with brackets. So all my tools are nice and handy here. I put these little shelves I repurposed on the top here to put some other parts. So that's about it for the lathe. Further upgrades, not very many. I'd like to get a new center with a reduced point center, and maybe even a digital readout on the tailstock. So this is my manual knee mill. It's a Maximart, I believe made in Taiwan. I originally bought it. It was 600 volt 3-phase. I ended up going to the local distributor here in Ontario and bought a single phase 220 motor and had it swapped out, and did some rewiring with a panel in the back. This mill is interesting. When we brought it home, we used a truck with a power tailgate, and about 24 inches from hitting the ground, the power tailgate tipped and the mill fell down onto the front of it. There was some damage to the cross slide screw and a few other components. I think the handle up in the speed control was damaged, so I had to make some new parts and fix that up, but it's running great now. This machine more or less came as it was with the power feed and the digital readout. The digital readout's an older model. I actually can't even seem to get parts for it. So the battery died in it for the battery backup. I ended up going in and wiring in a little battery, I guess, adapter, so that I can, instead of hardwiring the battery, I can replace the battery, when I need to. So one of the improvements I have on this mill is a R8 collet rack that I've added some shielding to keep the chips off, and I've also added this strip on the front with hooks and places for the various tools I use all the time. It makes it handy because the tool's always where you need it. The nice thing that came with this mill is someone had made these sheet metal stainless covers. They're very handy to keep the chips out. The only issue we have is the vise usually stays in the same position, so I use that part of the ways quite a bit. So there may be some wear down the future, but it's much more handy to have these on than not on, and they're easy to clean off and actually lay parts on for when you're doing production work. Just slide in and out, and they stay there on their own. I have bolted and leveled all my machines down. I originally did not, but I found that I'm getting much better results with bolted down than just sitting free on their own. I actually found that my mill was walking a bit across the floor over time, over a few years, so I have bolted down. That's about it for the mill. So this is my Tormac PNC 1100 CNC machine. It has an R8 spindle. I've done a few minor modifications of things. At the top there, where the filter was, I found that chips would be clogging up that filter, so now I've made a chute that the chips can't fall on there. It's open at the back, at the bottom, so it still works well. You'll see a cable coming out of the side of the panel. What I have done is I have added a emergency stop on a magnet. That was probably one of the biggest things I did, because the e-stop is on the panel and you have to actually lean into the machine to stop this thing if you get a crash. The computer, the spacebar feed hold does have a slight delay, so sometimes you're faster off hitting the e-stop. I have cleaned up the panel. There was some rust at the bottom. I added some paint on there just to make it look nice. I also added these stainless steel covers that bolt on, keep the chips out. I still have to make the one from between the vices. I usually leave these vices on 99% of the time. They are well within the range of the machine, which is 9x18. And if I sometimes have a larger plate, I just mount a fixture subplate in the vices, because you have plenty of Z height on this. I do have a chip guard there on a magnet I've made up. I just made the plastic piece there so it can either go vertical or horizontal. Right now it's in the vertical orientation. I do run a Noga Mist Cool on here. It's sitting in there right now, but it's very effective. I don't run coolant on my machines here. I live up in Canada. I don't heat the shop 24/7, so the coolant would be freezing in the tanks and in the lines, so I just use it sparingly when I can, or spray bottles. I did a couple other things I've done is I did make a rack here on the cabinet where the computer's in, just to hang the wrenches and the hammer. I made a little repurposed a monitor stand into a keyboard monitor stand, so that helps there. The other thing too is I made this little shelf here to put the R8 collets and some of the tools that I'm working on and using, with some files can slide in the back of it. just made a Delrin and bolted on. That's kind of it for the machine. Other thing I want to do is make a permanent hook to hang the blowgun, and put a T-valve up at the top of the enclosure to, when I'm running Noga, I can still have both. Now I have to disconnect a blowgun and run a blowgun from the other side of the mill. We're across here where the bench is. I run one from there if I need that extra air line. So this here is my Ingar RT70 surface grinder. I bought this used in kind of a very sore state about 2 years ago. I completely refurbished it, painted it. It was 575 3-phase. I ended up putting a 220 single-phase motor on there with a control box. It has a digital readout on it, which was really nice. It came with it when I bought it, so it was one of the reasons why. I ended up putting this sign magnet I purchased at an auction on it. I've had to make my own limit stop here, and actually had to make that little oil cap. The wheel cover, it came with an open wheel. I ended up making this cover. I still have to get it hard anodized, but it works out very well. It's hinged on this side, and I've left some holes that are temporarily plugged by those button screws for putting the Noga coolant or putting a coolant adapter on. I had to redo all the ways on this, the oil lines, and it was quite a lot of work, but it actually grinds really nice. It's just manual, but it does what I need it to do. And I also added the light. The other addition I did and modification I did to this was I made a bracket that I bolted to the side of the cabinet, which now has my demagnetizer, which is nice and handy, so I can, when I grind, I can demagnetize my parts right away. So another modification I made was I bought a set of 5C collets from 1/16 up to, I believe, 1/16. I didn't really have a place to put them, so what I did was I used something off of a kitchen, we were doing a kitchen renovation, had an extra door slide out part. So I mounted this in there. It keeps them nicely hidden away and out of the direct dust and debris, and I don't use up drawer space on my cabinets. So that was a nice addition. So I'm just gonna take a pan around my shop. As you can tell, things are pretty tightly packed. In the corner there, I have a belt sander and disc sander. Cabinet in between, right beside that, 4 screws. I have my surface plate, which just acts as a catch-all for all the stuff I have to sort. I have a rolling chip shield for throwing chips there, so I can move that wherever I want. Then I have my mill sitting there. Toolbox with more mechanics type tools. Cabinets up above. I've got my lathe sitting there, the door out the back. Cabinet full of tooling. My toolbox full of machinist measuring tools. My CNC mill. Controls in the foreground here. I have a bench in the middle of the shop. There's a heater sitting on it and a fan, and also my arbor press with a couple of grinders in the background with various wheels. I have a workbench across the back with a woodworker's vise I made 25 years ago. A homemade anvil out of a piece of crane rail, and a vise Back here I have my Lyle drill grinder I picked up with more cabinets and bins, and there's a cabinet underneath it with more tooling and stuff. Here's my King horizontal bandsaw. I actually made a plate so I can stand it up and also use it as vertical bandsaw. And back around here on the back side of the bench, I have my oxyacetylene bottle cart and also my drill press there.